Hi, sweetheart, it's Grandma. I've got another book to read. This one's called Cinderella Liberator. Once upon a time, there was a girl named Cinderella. She was called Cinderella because she slept by the fireplace in the kitchen of a great house, and sometimes the cinders burned holes in her clothes. A cinder is another name for a red-hot bit of wood from the fire. Her clothes were old and worn and tattered. She slept there because she was in the kitchen cooking and washing all day, and because she did not have a bedroom. She did kitchen work all day because her stepmother made her do it. Her stepmother made her do it all because even though there was plenty for everyone and plenty of people to do the work, her stepmother believed there was not enough for everyone, and she wanted lots for her own two daughters, Perlita and Paloma. Nobody asked what Cinderella or Perlita or Paloma wanted. Sometimes Cinderella was sad and wanted to go play with other children. Sometimes she was happy to go to the market to buy eggs from the chicken lady and apples from the apple farmer and milk from the dairy farmer. Sometimes she liked making cakes with the apples and the milk and the eggs and flour from the wheat farmer. Sometimes she wanted to run away, but she was not sure where to go. Sometimes she was tired. Cinderella became a good cook. She got to know everyone in the marketplace. She grew strong and capable. Perlita and Paloma sat upstairs trying on clothes and arranging their hair and not going out because the people in the town were not fancy enough for them, according to their mother. And then one day came the news that the king's son, Prince Nevermind, was holding a great ball, which is what they called dance parties in those days. The stepmother made sure that Perlita and Paloma were invited, and they spent days trying on clothes and ordering dressmakers to make them new dresses out of satin and velvet and glitter, and planning how to put up their hair and stick it full of jewels and ornaments and artificial flowers. Cinderella came upstairs to bring them some ginger cookies and saw all the piles of jewels and all the mirrors and all the fabric and all the fuss. Perlita was doing her best to pile her hair as high as hair could go. She said that surely having the tallest hair in the world would make her the most beautiful woman, and being the most beautiful would make her the happiest. Paloma was sewing extra bows onto her dress because she thought that surely having the fanciest dress in the world would make you the most beautiful woman in the world, and being the most beautiful would make you the happiest. They weren't very happy because they were worried that someone might have higher hair or more bows than they did, which probably someone did. Usually someone does. But there isn't actually a most beautiful person in the world because there are so many kinds of beauty. Some people love roundness and softness, and other people love sharp edges and strong muscles. Some people like thick hair like a lion's mane, and other people like thin hair that pours down like an inky waterfall. And some people love someone so much that they forget what they look like. Some people think that the night sky full of stars at midnight is the most beautiful thing imaginable. Some people think it's a forest in snow, and some people, well, there are a lot of people with a lot of ideas about beauty and love. When you love someone a lot, they just look like love. Cinderella wished she could go to the ball, but she had nothing to wear aside from her everyday dress with the ashes and the patches and the holes, and she had not been invited. There's nothing worse than not being invited to the party. She went upstairs on the great day and helped Perlita and Paloma pile up their hair with ornaments and put on their fancy dresses, which were so long and tight they couldn't have run after a dog or climbed a fence. They were not sure they were beautiful, but they were sure that being beautiful would make them happy. Off to the ball they went in the family coach pulled by the family horses, and down went Cinderella to the kitchen, which was very quiet. She sat by the fire, feeling very sad and alone, and staring into the fire, and she cried 3 tears. It was so quiet you could hear each tear fall into the ashes with a tiny splash. "I wish someone would help me," she said out loud into the quiet. Suddenly there was a knock at the kitchen door. She opened the big creaky door, and a little blue woman was standing on the doorstep. She had a big skirt and a big nose and a pointed hat and hands like knobby blue twigs, and she was holding a stick in those knobby hands. "May I help you?" asked Cinderella. And the little blue woman said, "I came to help you. I'm your fairy godmother. You wish to go to the ball at the castle, is that so?" "Yes," said Cinderella. "And then you shall go," said the fairy godmother, whose voice sounded like milk pouring into a glass, and the wings of the pigeons. She said, "You need a ride. Run into the pumpkin patch and get a pumpkin." Cinderella opened the kitchen door as she was told, and ran out into the night and picked a big orange pumpkin from the garden, as heavy as she could lift. The fairy godmother waved her wand, and the pumpkin became a glass coach that glittered in the moonlight, for it was a full moon night, and moonlight made the town look like a magical blue world of blue light and darkness like blue velvet. The moon was reflected in the glass coach. Sighed Cinderella, and then she thought, "But you can't have a coach without horses." It was as if her godmother heard her thoughts. "Get me 6 mice from the trap," she said. And Cinderella wondered what she had in mind. The trap was just a box that mice walked into when they smelled cheese inside, but they couldn't get out until Cinderella let them out. Cinderella would walk down to the river with the box of mice and let them go free where they couldn't nibble at the cakes and loaves she baked. This time she opened it at the kitchen door. The fairy godmother waved her blue arm, and the tiny legs and round bodies and long hairless tails of the mice began to change. Their legs and their necks grew long. The dainty little mouse feet with their tiny toes became horses' hard hooves. Their coats became shiny instead of soft, and their round backs arched. They shivered and shouted, and suddenly 6 dapple gray horses stood there, with black manes and tails like black rivers, black muzzles as soft as velvet, and the same round black eyes and pricked up ears the mice had, but no mouse whiskers. They were lively horses, and they stamped and snorted and switched their tails and tossed their heads, ready to go. Cinderella was astonished. "Now," said the fairy godmother, "we need a coachwoman." "I'll get the rat trap," said Cinderella. There was one big gray rat in it, and then with another wave of the same blue arm with the same black stick, the rat was no longer a rat. It was a coachwoman with gray curls and a beautiful white velvet suit, with a velvet hat, who bowed to her and said, "Good evening, young lady." "Now," said the fairy, 6 lizards from the garden, and when Cinderella brought them back in a flower pot, there was another wave of the wand, and 6 footwomen stood before her, in silver satin pants and jackets, and the footwomen immediately began hitching up the horses. "Oh my," said Cinderella, "did the lizards want to be footwomen?" Footwomen stand at the front and the back of the coach, and make it look very important and busy. They open doors and deliver letters, and sometimes they blow a little gold trumpet to announce your arrival, or hold the horses' reins when the coach stops. "For tonight," said the fairy godmother, "they're here to help you, because you've always been kind to the mice and the rats, and never put out poison for them or traps that hurt them, and you've always smiled and said hello to the lizards when you went out to pick some lettuce or some raspberries." "The coach is amazing, but I can't go in my rags," said Cinderella. The fairy godmother said, "What rags?" and waved her stick, which was a magic wand, and giggled. Sometimes being a blue-skinned fairy godmother was fun. Cinderella looked down, and her patched, worn work dress had become a beautiful ball gown embroidered with birds and trees and crystals that looked like raindrops or tears. It was made out of silk, and it sounded like water when she moved, and it looked like the sky at the end of the day, blue and then deeper blue, and then so blue it was almost black, with pale clouds drifting by. She looked like a girl who was evening, and an evening that had become a girl. They call some dresses evening gowns, but this dress really was one, with clouds and the first stars coming out, and a crescent moon somewhere in there, and a few birds flying across the hem, black and shaped like the letter W in all that blue. The stars sparkled and the fabric swished when she moved. "I love this part of my job," said the fairy godmother, and giggled again. "Oh," said Cinderella, as she was almost ready to get into the coach in her beautiful dress, I'm still barefoot." One more wave of the wand, another giggle, and her dirty bare feet were clean, and she was wearing slippers that, like the coach, were made of deep blue glass. They were not very comfortable, and made a lot of noise when she walked on hard floors or stones, but they looked very special indeed. Oh, look, there's everybody. Away they went, the 6 horses yearning to gallop, the coachwoman keeping them at a lively trot, through the town at night, hoofs clattering on cobblestones, to the castle. No one questioned who the late guest was when she pulled up in such a fabulous coach, led by such a fine team of horses. And she went into the ball, and she danced, for she'd learned to dance in the market square at the harvest festival, and by watching her stepsister's dancing lessons, and sometimes dancing about the kitchen by herself when she was at work, or dancing with the boy who delivered the mail, or the girl who delivered the newspaper when they knocked on the kitchen door. She danced with so many people to the beautiful music of 3 drums, 4 tubas, 5 trumpets, 6 violins, 7 harps, 8 guitars, and 9 flutes, round and round the ballroom, all the people in dresses twirling around, so that if you saw them from above, they looked like whirling flowers in full bloom. The people in satin jackets and velvet breeches and brocade hats looked like flowers that had not yet bloomed, but were still folded up like buds. And then she danced with the prince, round and round and round some more. Prince Nevermind had very nice satin trousers and a very nice smile, and they talked a little until he asked her who she was. She was afraid he might laugh at her, or send her away in front of everybody, and so she ran away before that could happen. That is, she sent herself away. As she ran, her shoes came off, and she grabbed one but left the other behind her on the ballroom floor. She didn't want to tell him that she was Cinderella from the kitchen in the town below the castle. She ran out barefoot into the night and jumped into her coach, and the coachwoman called out to the horses, and the footwomen jumped up, and the horses galloped off with snorts and clattering hooves, and they were home before she knew it. The blue fairy godmother opened the door and asked her if she'd had a good time, and she said yes and no, and it was very interesting to see all the fancy clothes and the fancy plates with fancy cakes and the fancy mirrors and the fancy lights. And then she said it was even more interesting to see lizards become footwomen and mice become horses. The fairy godmother replied that true magic is to help each thing become its best and most free self. And then she asked the horses if they wanted to be horses. 5 of the horses said, in horse language, which fairy godmothers speak, and most of us do not, that they loved running through the night and being afraid of nothing and bigger than almost everyone. The 6th horse said she'd had a lot of fun, but she had mice children at home and wanted to get back to them. The fairy godmother nodded in understanding, and suddenly the 6th horse shrank and lost its mane, and its shaggy tail became a pink tail with a fine fuzz like velvet. And there she was, a tiny gray mouse with pink feet, running back to her tinier pink children in the nest in the wall to tell them all about the enchantment that had made her a horse for a night. And then the lizard said, in the quiet language of lizards, that nothing was better than being a lizard, being able to run up walls and to lie in the sun on warm days and to snap up flies in the garden and never worry about anything except owls and crows. And though they loved wearing satin silver and going to parties, and they'd been happy to help Cinderella, and they would tell all their lizard friends about it, they would rather be lizards again. And suddenly they were, running off toward the garden on their little lizard legs, trailing long lizard tails, the moon making the scales on their lean lizard bodies shine like silver. The coachwoman said that she would be happy to stay a coachwoman, for her rat children had grown up and gone out into the world, and although she'd had many adventures as a rat, there were more adventures she could have as a coachwoman, and so she stayed in her velvet suit, and she led the horses off to the stable, and she gave them each a nice bucket of oats. And Cinderella, she looked down at herself and said, "I have to make breakfast in a few hours, and I can't in this beautiful dress. I'll spill on it. It will catch fire, and it'll be in the way." Suddenly she was all alone in her old patched dress, in which she could do anything: play with the dogs, climb the walnut trees, make the messiest cakes, garden where the lizards were basking in the sun. She might have thought she'd imagined it all, but there was one blue glass slipper in her pocket, which she put in the kitchen drawer. Prince Nevermind was a very polite person, and he was sad he had frightened his guest, and she had lost her shoe. He had asked and asked at the party, but no one knew her name or where she lived, so the next day he got on his own fine black mare and rode about, knocking on doors, asking if the person who wore that shoe was there. "No," said the people in the big brick house by the river, and "No," said the people in the gray mansion on the hill, and "No," said the people in the tower next to the woods, and "No," said the farmer whose golden wheat field spread on and on beyond her fine farmhouse, and "No," said the clockmaker who lived in his little house full of ticking clocks, and "No," said the painter in the house full of pictures of animals and places you only see in dreams, and her paintings, and "No," said the dancing teacher in their house full of music, and "No," said the blacksmith as she worked iron on her forge, and "No," said the bird doctor as he fixed a sparrow's wing. And then the prince came to Cinderella's house. Her stepmother answered the door, and, greedy to see her daughters become friends with a prince, said that maybe the lost shoe was theirs. So the prince came into the parlor and sat on the golden sofa, and one sister and then the other sister tried on the shoe, but their feet were too small, because when you sit at home all day and never run down to the river or carry home a full basket from the market, your feet don't grow strong and sturdy as they should. Cinderella was bringing up the tea and the cake she had just baked when she saw the prince. Suddenly she was tired of so many things: of being in the kitchen, of not being at the table, of feeling like she was less important than her stepsisters, of not being invited to parties. "It's my shoe," she said. Everyone looked at her in surprise. The prince handed it to her, and she pulled the other shoe out of her pocket, because all good dresses have big pockets, and put on the glass slippers, which had not disappeared when her dress had turned back into her everyday dress. Sometimes fairy godmothers forget a detail or two. The two sisters ran out of the room in a tantrum, or two tantrums, one for each of them, because they believed they needed to be more important than their stepsister. Their mother had told them that there was not enough for everybody, and that they needed to take things from other people to have enough for themselves, which was, by the way, not true. There's always enough for everyone if you share it properly, or if it has been shared properly before you get there. There's enough food, enough love, enough homes, enough time, enough crayons, enough people to be friends with each other. After the stepmother had gone away, the fairy godmother appeared in a cloud of dark blue dust. There was nobody in the room but the prince and Cinderella, and this blue woman with magic powers, but the prince hardly noticed the newcomer. "So," said the prince, "you're the girl who ran away. Why?" Cinderella felt very embarrassed, but she said, "I was afraid. I'm a servant and not supposed to go to balls, and not supposed to have nicer clothes than my stepsisters." But her fairy godmother said, "You are the daughter of a great judge who had to go far away to help others, and thought his new wife and her daughters would be kind. You are the daughter of a great sea captain who lost her ship at sea and will come home another day on another ship. And besides," said the fairy godmother, "nobody is good or valuable because of who their parents are, or bad because their parents are bad. They are as good and valuable as they are in their own words and deeds, and you are kind to mice, and bake splendid cakes, and have a heart full of hopes and dreams." "What are your dreams?" asked Prince Nevermind. Cinderella said, I would like to own my own cake shop, and I would like to be free to go see the people on all the farms who raise the food I cook, and I would like to ride the dapple gray horses, and I would like to see my mother come sailing into the bay on a fine ship. All those things seemed so far away. She felt sad for a moment, so she changed the subject. "What are your dreams?" she asked the prince. He replied after he thought for a moment, "I sometimes wish I was not a prince, so I would not have people staring at me all the time and wondering why I have so much when they have not enough. I would like to wear the clothes the farm boys wear, so I could play without someone shouting that I would get my satin trousers dirty. I'd like to get dirty sometimes. I'd like to be free to wander the hills all alone. I had to run away from my guards to find out who lost the shoe. I'd like to learn how to make things grow and work so hard I sleep deeply all night instead of doing nothing in the castle. I'd like to have friends. Nobody's friends with a prince." "I would like to have friends," said Cinderella. "I'm friendly with all the people in the marketplace, and they tell me of their farms and lives and families, but I'm not free to go visit because I must work every day here in the kitchen downstairs. That's why they call me Cinderella, because of the cinders in the fire in the fireplace in the kitchen here." "Well," said the fairy godmother, "not all magic needs me. Perhaps you two are friends?" "I could use a friend," said the prince shyly but bravely. "Would you like to be friends?" And then he felt terrible because maybe she would say no. She did not say no. She said, "Yes, if you would too." And then the two of them stopped being people who had no friends. The fairy godmother told Cinderella that she didn't actually have to stay there and work all day every day. That very day she put on her boots and got on one of the dapple gray horses, and the prince got on his black horse. They rode out to the apple orchard that belonged to the kind old apple farmer. There they stood on ladders and picked apples until they were tired and had 30 big baskets of apples. The old apple farmer promised to introduce the young prince to the neighbors, the other farmers, and he asked the prince to come back in the winter when they cut back the branches of the apple trees when they are bare, and in the spring when the trees are in bloom and the bees are all buzzing around. Prince Nevermind rode home to tell his parents he wanted to be a farmer, not a prince, or maybe a farmer prince, but the fairy godmother was waiting for Cinderella. "Go left until you get to the windmill, and then down the lane and up the alley, and you will find your cake shop. Next to it is a stable with 5 stalls and 5 dapple gray horses inside, and the coachwoman lives upstairs from the horses." "Why didn't you tell me I was free to go earlier?" said Cinderella. The fairy godmother said, "I was really busy helping some other children, and then I lost the directions to your house. Also, I am here to help people, but they have to ask for help. You never asked for help until the night of the ball." It is true that if you want or need help, it is really helpful to ask for it. Nowadays, Perlita runs a hair salon where she piles up people's hair as high as it will go, and she's happy because she's doing what she loves. Paloma is the seamstress at a dress shop where she makes dresses all day because she discovered she liked making beautiful dresses even more than wearing them. They don't miss the days when they sat at home doing nothing and waiting for life to begin. They are good at what they do. One day, they went to Cinderella and said they were very sorry for how they had treated her, and that they were wrong, and could they be friends? Cinderella served them slices of cake, and later on Paloma made her some riding pants, and then Perlita brought over some hair cream for the horses' tails, and they were friends. They became their truest selves, and so did their mother. Their mother, Cinderella's stepmother, turned into the roaring in the trees on stormy nights. Sometimes you can hear her outside, a strong wind rattling the windows and shaking the leaves off the trees, saying more and more and more, or mine, mine, mine. And then the hungry wind dies down, and she's gone until next time. Sometimes that roaring is inside your own heart and head, And then it dies down there too. The wind in all our heads that says we need more. We need to grab what someone else has and steal it away like the hungry wind. Everyone can be a fairy godmother if they help someone who needs help, and anyone can be a wicked stepmother. Most of us have some of that hunger in our hearts, but we can still try to be someone who says, I have plenty, or even, here, have this, and how are you? There's everybody. I really liked that. That was maybe the best Cinderella story I've ever heard. Cinderella Liberator. I love you, sweetheart. We'll read another story another time. Bye-bye.